My name is Sensei Dave Armstrong, and we're going to talk about my story navigating through foster care, juvenile detention, boys' homes. So I grew up in California with a single mom. My dad was never really in the picture. I can't really remember my biological dad. And unfortunately, my mom married a guy that decided to become very physically and mentally abusive towards her and myself. At 11, I was arrested for felony armed robbery. I tried to rob some lady with a pistol. And that really began the spiral of the foster care system, the juvenile detention system, boys' homes, group homes, until I turned 18 and ended up homeless. Growing up, I was neglected a lot. My mom was a habitual drunk, unfortunately. And, when my stepfather came into the picture, he used to beat us, and that drove me out of the house. So I was never at home. I was never at school. I was always running the streets, always doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing because, well, my home environment was just absolutely horrific. I remember my stepfather grabbing me and putting me in a headlock, and he would give me these knuckle sandwiches. And he would just knot his fist up and just knot my head up like this all the time, just because I existed, just because I was there and I was a punching bag. So that drove me to the streets, that drove me out of the house, that drove me to just not really fit in like normal kids would. I remember one time my stepfather was beating my mom, and I had had enough, and I was probably about 11 years old, and I just didn't want to take it anymore. I didn't want her to take it anymore, and even though she wasn't the best parent, she was my mom. And this guy, total stranger, came in and just disrupted everything that we had. So one day he's hitting on her, and I remember just going, enough, I can't take this anymore. And I grabbed a baseball bat and I went to wailing on him with the baseball bat. Unfortunately, I was not that big. And he took the bat from me and gave me a beating, and then proceeded to beat my mom. And you're just curled up in the corner, bloodied, thinking, why me? And I remember my social worker, Deborah Bowser, when she was coming up to the school to pick me up, she had called the front office so they can send me to the front and await her. And I thought I was in trouble. What did I do now? I was always in and out of trouble. And as I'm sitting there and I'm watching her walk up the walkway, it felt different. It felt like something was really wrong. And so when she came in, I remember being just so nervous. Not nervous like I was going to get in trouble, nervous like something magnanimous had happened, and something did. She walked me to the car and she said, Dave, we have to go and see your mom. She's in the hospital and they don't think that she's going to be okay. When someone hears those words, they don't think she's going to be okay. You don't necessarily think she's going to die. You think, okay, maybe she's going to be in the hospital for something, for some stent or something like that. But Deborah elaborated. She says they don't think she's going to live. And that about an hour drive to where she was, to the hospital, was just the longest drive ever. It just felt so solitary. I felt just like alone, because if I lost my mom, I had no one. I mean, I certainly wasn't going to go to my stepfather, who was always abusive. I had no family whatsoever. It was just me and my mom, and well, she was about to be gone. When we walked into the room that she was in, she was hooked up to all these machines, and I could remember the beeping on the monitor. And then all of a sudden, she starts going into convulsions. And she's there shaking on the bed. And then nurses and doctors are rushing in, pushing me and my social worker out of the room. And it was just, talk about traumatic for a 12-year-old kid to see, knowing that his mom is going to die. And indeed she did. She passed away shortly after that, and I couldn't even go to the funeral. I felt like I was upset. I was upset that she left me. I was upset that this happened to me. I was upset that I'm the one who has to go through this. And I'm looking at normal kids, normal people that have two parents, a family, and unity. and I had nothing. So you would think that after my mom passed away, my life just couldn't get worse. It would have to somehow have some upward trajectory. Things would have to eventually get better, but they didn't. I was sentenced to a boys' camp. I was still there. I had no family, so you have no hope, right? You just have no hope that something is going to be okay. I didn't know what was going to have to happen to me after I left the boys' camp. I didn't know who I was going to be with and what was going to happen to young Dave. And so one day I remember just feeling so fed up, just so empty, so void. And I ran away from the boys' camp. It was pouring rain, and I was sitting underneath a bridge, and I just kept saying, why me? Why me? I felt like God, the universe, the world, decided to play some horrible practical joke on young Dave. Like, let's see how much this kid can endure. Let's see how much, the story of Job, in the Bible. Let's just throw everything at this kid and just see how much he can endure. And so sitting underneath that bridge, I said, I don't want to endure anymore. I had no way to endure anymore. And when you don't have any light at the end of the tunnel, when you don't see that there's any sort of future, when you're apathetic, when you're void, this is when you decide you just have to end it all. It's better to end it all. So I reached over, I grabbed a bottle, and I started cutting. And I tried to cut my wrists off, and it didn't work. And I remember thinking, wow, such a failure that you can't even kill yourself. And so this is how a lot of people end up feeling when they decide they want to kill themselves, when they want to end the pain. They're apathetic, they're tired, they've had enough. I really think that we can, as society, as the world, can do a better job of helping people feel like they're there, that they exist, that there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, some sort of future for themselves. So as young Dave, as I walked back bloodied to the boys' camp, they bandaged me up. They put me on suicide watch. It was horrible. You're in a gown, a paper gown with nothing, no shoelaces, just some shoes without shoelaces, locked up in a room. And they put me on a lot of medicine, a lot of antidepressants and all this stuff that I hated. It made me feel worse, as if that was even possible. It made me feel worse. I felt like I was just a walking zombie, just taking up space, just existing for no good reason, but I couldn't do anything about it. So after I served the time, the 2 years at the boys' camp, they ended up putting me in foster homes, in group homes, juvenile detention. And so why all three? Well, I would always act up. I was always doing something to get rearrested or to get thrown out of a foster home or thrown out of a group home and placed into juvenile detention. So it was just constantly all three of those things. And I can't even tell you how many, dozens upon dozens of different placements from 12 to 18. And once you turn 18, you have nothing. The state didn't give me a house and a car, and heck, they didn't even give you a driver's license. You have nothing. And so we end up homeless. A lot of us end up running the streets, homeless, couch surfing, because we weren't set up for success. And so that's what happened for a little while. I was sleeping in a trailer in a field in the back of a girlfriend of mine at the time's house. It was roach and rat infested. We had no electricity, but it was a roof. And I had a dream, as Martin Luther King would say, and I really did. I had an amazing mentor that was a pilot in the Air Force. And Ron Barnick was just, he saved my life. Ron saved my life. he inspired me to not only join the Air Force, but to help other kids as he had done me. And he also inspired me to see the world. And I think that was probably the most important thing, is to get out of the environment that I was in, join the Air Force, see the world. I remember Ron would bring me over to his house, and he had trinkets from all over the world. So he had something from Japan, something from Korea, something from Africa, something from where I live now, Greece. And I would ask him about these things, and he would have a story. Oh, I got this at the flea market here and he would show me where Korea is, or where Turkey is, and on the globe, he had this nice globe that we'd spin. I remember spinning that globe sometimes, and I would stop it and ask him, like, oh, you know, what about this part of the world? What about that part of the world? And it was just amazing that there was a place outside of where I grew up that was absolutely different from where I grew up. I mean, these things that he brought over, little trinkets from all over the place, were just amazing. You know, I'll show you this. This is an award that I have for a volunteer of the quarter back in 2002. And it's made of koa wood. Koa wood is indigenous to Hawaii. So I spent 4 years in Hawaii, and this is a trinket that I get to share on stage and with youth that I'm mentoring, to show them that there's things that are only in certain parts of the world that you've never seen or experienced. And that's what Ron did for me. Ron inspired me to join the Air Force as he was in the Air Force, but even that road wasn't easy. So there's something called the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Battery Test, and it's just a test to enter any branch of the military. And the Air Force has the highest standards that you have to score to get in the Air Force. And so I remember taking the ASVAB and the recruiter telling me, sorry, Dave, you didn't score high enough. Well, I was illiterate. I couldn't read or write. I couldn't study. I wasn't smart. And I was just devastated when he told me I couldn't join the Air Force. At that time, I had some determination. I had some resiliency. And I said, okay, what can I do about this problem? And he says, well, you can retest in about 6 months. And he gave me 2 study guides, 2 ASVAB study guides. And for 6 months, as I slept in a trailer in the back of a field without electricity and roaches, I studied every day. For 6 months, I had to stay away from my homies. I had to stay off the streets. I isolated myself from everyone and everything because I didn't want to lose this opportunity. I didn't want to fall short. And so when I retested, I scored high enough to get in the Air Force. And I remember them telling me, okay, we're going to ship you out. Here's the date. You know, are you ready? Are you okay? Absolutely. Let's go. I'm ready now. And it was the first time I got to get outside of California to Texas, where basic training is, and then to Mississippi for technical school. And it just started the traveling and seeing different places, even in the United States. And it was amazing. At that point, things started going uphill. Things started getting better. That trajectory was going, and you could feel it. And even then, you still have this residual something from the hood, right? You still have something. So I couldn't even go back to California and get around my foster brother, who I'm very close with, who's in prison. He's doing life. My other foster brother is doing life without the possibility of parole. And I couldn't go back to visit them for a few years because I knew that I might fall back into that environment, to doing the stuff that they were still doing, unfortunately. And so I didn't even go back. And I tell youth right now, like if I'm mentoring a young person or their parents, or I have a program for at-risk youth, kids that are in juvenile detention, and I tell them, when you get out the hood, stay out the hood. When you're strong enough to go back, then you go back. And so I think that's the beautiful part about getting over your trauma, is being able to help others navigate through the similar traumas that they're experiencing and end up okay. But I know that I've been able to, through some great mentors and some great therapy, you can get over it. People can get over their trauma. Where did joining the Air Force and getting out of the hood and feeling like there's hope, That's what I'll say. Where did feeling like there's hope for Dave lead me? It led me to awards in the Air Force. It led me to recognition from the states that I was in for mentoring programs, for volunteering at different agencies. It led me to see the world, to see Italy and Hawaii and Greece and just so many places that most people end up having to vacation and it just once in a lifetime, and I get to go live at these places for 6 months to a year, 2 years to 4 years in Hawaii. It was just amazing. And at the same time, my martial arts instructor, who was in my life before, instilled something huge in me. He instilled the power of martial arts and the power of the discipline, the drive, the determination that martial arts brings to a person. And so I started my own martial arts school because of Sensei Otto Johnson, my martial arts instructor, and opened several schools, mentored and trained young and old all over the world. And then it came time for me to retire out the Air Force, and I had, did some financially stable stuff, some sound things. And so I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to retire in Greece, where my wife happens to be from. So I met my wife here, and I promised her before we left to Portugal, so I spent a couple years in Portugal with my wife, that we'd come back here. And so when I retired, I came back here with her. And for about 2 years, I really didn't do much. I hung out on the beach a lot. I drank a lot of coffee, made some friends, traveled around Europe. But there was something nagging at my heart. I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't done helping the world, helping people, sharing my story, inspiring. And so I started a life coaching business. I actually went and got a degree in psychology with an emphasis in life coaching at 46 years old. So if that's not inspirational enough for some of us that are a little older that say, man, I don't know about going to school, you certainly can. It just takes discipline, drive, and determination. That's what it takes in life, right? To overcome all the stuff that you've had to deal with. I finished a book, and then I started becoming a motivational speaker. So I started refining my speaking abilities, which I, innately had some, and, refined those. And I ended up joining Toastmasters and won the first year I was in Toastmasters, won 2 different categories against 200 people here in Europe. First time that they've seen anyone win both categories, the prepared and impromptu speeches. And then, now I have a nonprofit that works with at-risk youth or youth that are in juvenile detention centers to train them and to provide inspiration, motivation, and that light at the end of the tunnel. And I really believe that with some training backing up hope, right? Because without hope, we have nothing. And a lot of these kids don't have hope that they're going to be out of the hood. They don't have hope that their life isn't going to look like everyone's life around. They don't have hope. I certainly didn't. I thought that I was going to be a hitman or a drug dealer. That's it. Or dead. I thought I'd be dead. I wasn't going to go to prison. I just wasn't going to be alive. And so these kids need to know that they can. Just because they don't see people around them doing great things, traveling the world, being awesome, having an amazing life, just because they don't see it doesn't mean that they can't achieve it. They can, and they will, and they do.